Lieutenant Sarah Martinez stood at attention in the crisp morning air of Naval Base San Diego, her dress blues immaculate despite the early hour. The ceremony was already in full swing, with rows of distinguished officers and their families gathered to witness the promotion of several senior naval personnel. Sarah had earned her place here through years of dedicated service in naval intelligence, but today she felt like an outsider looking in. The problem wasn't her qualifications or her record. Sarah had graduated top of her class from the Naval Academy, served with distinction on 3 deployments, and had recently completed a classified mission that had earned her a commendation from the Pentagon. The problem was Admiral Robert Harrison, the man now approaching the podium to deliver the keynote address. Admiral Harrison was a legend in the Navy. His career spanned 3 decades, including combat commands in 2 major conflicts and a stint as the youngest captain to command a carrier battle group. His chest bore ribbons that told the story of American naval power, and his reputation for tactical brilliance was matched only by his reputation for being old-fashioned in his views about women in combat roles. Sarah watched as Admiral Harrison's eyes swept across the assembled crowd. When his gaze fell upon her, she saw something flicker across his weathered face. It wasn't quite disapproval, but it wasn't acceptance either. She had heard the whispers about his opinions on female officers in operational roles, but she had hoped that her record would speak for itself. The ceremony proceeded with military precision. Officers were called forward to receive their new ranks, each accompanied by family members who would pin on the new insignia. Sarah's heart raced as her name was announced for promotion to lieutenant commander. This was the moment she had worked toward for years, the recognition of her contributions to naval operations and intelligence gathering. She marched forward with measured steps, her mother and younger brother flanking her as they had practiced the night before. Her mother, a retired Army nurse, beamed with pride as they approached the platform where Admiral Harrison waited. Sarah's brother, a college sophomore who had taken time off from classes to attend, carried the velvet box containing her new insignia. As they reached the platform, Sarah executed a perfect salute. Admiral Harrison returned it with professional courtesy, but his expression remained stern. The crowd watched as her mother stepped forward to perform the traditional pinning ceremony, carefully removing Sarah's lieutenant bars and replacing them with the gold oak leaves of a lieutenant commander. It should have been a moment of pure triumph. Sarah had overcome countless obstacles to reach this point, including subtle and not-so-subtle suggestions from some senior officers that she might be better suited for administrative roles rather than operational assignments. She had proven herself in situations where failure could have meant lives lost, and she had done so while maintaining the highest standards of professionalism and competence. But as the ceremony concluded and families began to mingle with the newly promoted officers, Admiral Harrison's behavior became increasingly apparent. He moved through the crowd, congratulating each officer personally, spending time with their families, and sharing stories about their service records. When he reached Sarah, however, his demeanor shifted noticeably. "Congratulations on your promotion, Lieutenant Commander Martinez," he said formally, extending his hand for a brief, perfunctory handshake. There was no warmth in his voice, no acknowledgement of her specific achievements, and no interest in meeting her family who stood proudly beside her. Sarah's mother, accustomed to military protocols from her own service, stepped forward slightly. "Admiral Harrison, I'm Maria Martinez. I wanted to thank you for recognizing Sarah's hard work. She's dedicated her life to serving her country." Admiral Harrison's response was polite but cold. "I'm sure she has," he replied curtly, already beginning to turn away toward the next officer. The dismissal was subtle but unmistakable, and Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and frustration. The slight was noticed by others in attendance. Fellow officers who had witnessed the interaction exchanged glances, some looking uncomfortable with what they had observed. Sarah's family maintained their composure, but she could see the hurt in her mother's eyes and the confusion on her brother's face. As the reception continued, Admiral Harrison's pattern became more obvious. He spent nearly 15 minutes with Lieutenant Commander David Chen, discussing Chen's recent deployment and praising his leadership during a difficult humanitarian mission. He engaged warmly with Lieutenant Commander Rebecca Johnson's parents, sharing stories about his own children and the challenges of military family life. But when opportunities arose for further interaction with Sarah, He consistently found reasons to be elsewhere. The most painful moment came during the group photograph session. As the newly promoted officers assembled for official photos, Admiral Harrison positioned himself in the center, surrounded by the male officers. When the photographer suggested rearranging the group to include Sarah more prominently, the Admiral's expression darkened slightly. "I think the current arrangement is fine," he said firmly, his tone leaving no room for discussion. Sarah found herself relegated to the edge of the photograph, technically included but clearly marginalized. The message was clear to everyone present. Admiral Harrison did not view Sarah as equal to her male counterparts, regardless of her qualifications or achievements. His behavior was subtle enough to avoid being called overt discrimination, but obvious enough to make his feelings known. As the ceremony wound down, Sarah managed to maintain her professional composure, but inside she was struggling with a mixture of anger, disappointment, and frustration. This should have been one of the proudest days of her career, but it had been tainted by the clear disapproval of one of the Navy's most senior and respected leaders. Her mother approached her as families began to depart. "Sweetheart, don't let his attitude diminish what you've accomplished today. You've earned this promotion through your own merit and dedication." Sarah nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Admiral Harrison's opinion might matter more than her mother's support when it came to future assignments and career opportunities. The Navy was still very much an institution where the approval of senior leaders could make or break a career, and having Admiral Harrison's apparent disapproval could have lasting consequences. As they walked toward their car, Sarah's brother voiced what they were all thinking. "That was pretty messed up what that Admiral did. It was like he couldn't see past the fact that you're a woman." Sarah sighed, looking back at the ceremony site where Admiral Harrison was now engaged in animated conversation with several male officers. "That's the reality I have to work with, Jake. I just have to prove myself beyond any shadow of a doubt." But even as she said the words, Sarah wondered if proof would ever be enough for men like Admiral Harrison. She had already accomplished more than many of her male peers, yet it seemed that her gender would always be a factor in how some senior leaders evaluated her worth as an officer. The drive home was quiet, each family member lost in their own thoughts about what they had witnessed. Sarah stared out the window at the San Diego skyline, wondering if she would ever truly be accepted as an equal in the institution she had devoted her life to serving. The promotion was a step forward, but the day's events had reminded her that the path ahead would continue to be challenging in ways that her male colleagues might never fully understand. Unknown to Sarah, however, the day's events had been observed by someone whose opinion would soon matter a great deal. Among the crowd of attendees had been a group of Navy SEALs, including one who had been watching the proceedings with growing interest and concern about what he was witnessing. Master Chief Petty Officer Marcus Thompson had been a Navy SEAL for 12 years, and in that time, he had learned to read people with the same precision he used to assess threats on the battlefield. Standing at the back of the promotion ceremony, he had watched Admiral Harrison's treatment of Lieutenant Commander Martinez with growing disbelief and anger. Marcus knew Sarah Martinez by reputation. Her intelligence work had directly supported 2 SEAL operations he had participated in, providing crucial information that had likely saved American lives. The briefings she had prepared were thorough, accurate, and had demonstrated an understanding of ground-level operational realities that impressed even the most skeptical special operations personnel. What Marcus had witnessed today went against everything he believed about military service and leadership. He had served alongside female pilots, intelligence officers, and support personnel who had proven themselves under the most demanding circumstances. To see a senior officer dismiss someone of Lieutenant Commander Martinez's caliber based on apparent gender bias was not just unprofessional, it was dangerous to the effectiveness of the entire military structure. As the ceremony concluded and families began to disperse, Marcus made a decision that would have significant consequences. Instead of leaving with his fellow SEALs, he approached Lieutenant Commander Martinez as she walked with her family toward the parking area. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, catching up to the small group. "Master Chief Thompson, SEAL Team 5. I wanted to congratulate you on your promotion." Sarah turned, surprised by the approach. Marcus was an imposing figure, even in his dress uniform. Standing well over 6 feet tall with the weathered look of someone who had seen combat, he commanded respect just by his presence. The array of decorations on his chest told the story of a distinguished career in special operations. "Thank you, Master Chief," Sarah replied, uncertain about why this senior enlisted SEAL would seek her out specifically. "I've had the privilege of working with intelligence you've provided on operations," Marcus continued, his voice carrying the quiet authority that came from years of leading men in dangerous situations. "Your work has been outstanding, and it's contributed directly to mission success in keeping good people alive." Sarah's mother and brother stepped back slightly, recognizing that this conversation had taken on a significance beyond simple congratulations. Other departing attendees began to notice the interaction, particularly when they recognized Marcus as one of the most senior SEALs on the base. "I appreciate that, Master Chief," Sarah said. "Intelligence support for special operations has always been a priority for me." Marcus nodded, then glanced back toward where Admiral Harrison was still engaged with other officers. When he looked back at Sarah, his expression was serious. "Ma'am, I've been in the Navy long enough to recognize when politics gets in the way of recognizing good people. What I saw here today was not reflective of your value as an officer or as a contributor to our mission." The words carried weight coming from someone of Marcus's stature. Navy SEALs occupied a unique position in the military hierarchy. While technically enlisted personnel, senior SEALs like Marcus commanded enormous respect from officers of all ranks due to their expertise and the critical nature of their missions. "I wanted you to know," Marcus continued, "that those of us who have benefited from your work see your true worth. Don't let anyone make you think otherwise." Before Sarah could fully process the significance of what was happening, Marcus stepped back and rendered a crisp, formal salute. It was the kind of salute usually reserved for formal ceremonies or showing respect to senior officers during official functions. For a Master Chief to salute a lieutenant commander in this context, in full view of other personnel, was making a very public statement about respect and recognition. Sarah returned the salute, understanding instinctively that this moment was about more than military courtesy. Around them, other personnel had stopped to observe the exchange. Word of what was happening began to spread quickly through the crowd. Admiral Harrison, still engaged in conversation with a group of male officers, noticed the commotion and turned to see what was drawing attention. His expression darkened as he observed the public display of respect being shown to Sarah by one of the base's most respected special operations personnel. Marcus was not finished. After completing the salute, he spoke in a voice loud enough to be heard by those nearby. "Ma'am, it's been an honor to work with intelligence provided by your team. The professionalism and accuracy of your work has directly contributed to successful operations and the safety of our personnel." The public nature of Marcus's statement was deliberate. In military culture, when a senior special operations leader publicly acknowledges the value of another service member's work, it carries enormous weight. It was a direct counter to the dismissive treatment Sarah had received from Admiral Harrison. Other SEALs who had attended the ceremony began to take notice. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, who had worked closely with Sarah's intelligence on a recent counterterrorism operation, stepped forward. "Master Chief is right, ma'am. Your briefings have been some of the best we've received. You understand what we need in the field." Within minutes, what had started as one SEAL showing respect had evolved into something larger. Senior Petty Officer Williams, a explosive ordnance disposal specialist who had coordinated with Sarah's team on multiple occasions, approached and offered his congratulations. Chief Petty Officer Jackson, a veteran of 3 combat deployments, added his voice to the growing chorus of support. Admiral Harrison watched this development with increasing displeasure. The public display of support for Lieutenant Commander Martinez from some of the Navy's most elite personnel was creating exactly the kind of attention he had hoped to avoid. His subtle dismissal of Sarah was now being publicly countered by people whose opinions carried significant weight throughout the command. Sarah found herself at the center of something she had never expected. The support from these seasoned special operations personnel was validating in a way that went beyond simple career advancement. These were people who judged others solely on competence and results, not on demographics or personal biases. Marcus, recognizing the broader impact of what was happening, made one final gesture. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small item, a SEAL Team 5 challenge coin. These coins were given only to those who had directly supported SEAL operations in a meaningful way, and receiving one was considered a high honor among military personnel. "Ma'am," Marcus said, presenting the coin with appropriate ceremony, "this is for your outstanding support to special operations. Your intelligence work has been crucial to our success." The presentation of the challenge coin was witnessed by dozens of personnel, including several senior officers who had initially paid little attention to the interaction. Challenge coins from elite units like SEAL teams were not given lightly, and the public presentation was a clear statement about Sarah's professional value. Admiral Harrison's jaw tightened as he observed the ceremony. He began moving toward the group, clearly intending to intervene or redirect attention elsewhere. But the damage to his narrative about Sarah's competence had already been done. Too many people had witnessed the public endorsement from personnel, whose judgment he could not easily dismiss. As Sarah accepted the challenge coin, she felt a surge of emotions she had been suppressing since the ceremony began. These men had served in the most dangerous situations the military could offer, and they were acknowledging her contribution to their success. It was validation of her professional worth from people who had no reason to offer false praise. "Thank you, Master Chief," she managed to say, her voice steady despite the emotion she was feeling. "It's been my honor to support your operations." Marcus nodded respectfully. "The honor has been ours, ma'am. Your professionalism and competence have made us all better at our jobs." By this point, the interaction had drawn the attention of base personnel beyond those who had attended the promotion ceremony. Word was spreading quickly through the command that the SEALs had publicly recognized Lieutenant Commander Martinez's value, creating a stark contrast with Admiral Harrison's earlier treatment. As Admiral Harrison finally reached the group, the moment had already passed. The public display of respect and recognition was complete, and its impact was already rippling through the crowd. He found himself in the awkward position of either acknowledging what had occurred or appearing petty by trying to diminish it. Sarah's mother watched the entire exchange with tears in her eyes, understanding that her daughter had just received something more valuable than any promotion or decoration. She had gained the public respect of warriors who measured worth only by results and character. The challenge coin felt heavy in Sarah's hand as she looked around at the faces of the SEALs who had chosen to support her. These were men who had seen combat, who had faced life-and-death situations, and who had chosen to publicly acknowledge her contributions to their success. Their opinion carried more weight with her than Admiral Harrison's disapproval ever could. The aftermath of the SEAL team's public recognition of Lieutenant Commander Martinez spread through Naval Base San Diego faster than Admiral Harrison could have anticipated. Within hours, word of the challenge coin presentation and the public endorsement had reached personnel throughout multiple commands, creating a buzz of conversation in ready rooms, mess halls, and administrative offices across the installation. Admiral Harrison retreated to his office that afternoon, his mood darkening with each update he received about the growing discussion of the morning's events. His aide, Lieutenant Commander Peters, had already fielded 3 phone calls from other senior officers asking about the situation, and the Admiral's email inbox contained several messages from colleagues who had heard various versions of what had occurred. The problem for Admiral Harrison was that the SEALs' intervention had fundamentally changed the narrative. Instead of Sarah being viewed as someone whose promotion might have been influenced by diversity initiatives or political correctness, she was now publicly recognized as someone whose work had directly contributed to successful special operations. The SEALs' reputation for accepting only the most competent personnel made their endorsement particularly powerful. Master Chief Thompson understood the implications of what he had initiated. That evening, he sat in the SEAL team ready room with several of his colleagues, discussing the day's events and their broader significance. "You realize this is going to get attention beyond just our command," Chief Petty Officer Jackson observed. "Admiral Harrison doesn't like being made to look foolish, especially in public." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes you have to decide what's more important, political considerations or doing what's right. Lieutenant Commander Martinez has earned our respect through her work, not through politics. If the Admiral has a problem with that, he can take it up with our operational results." The conversation reflected a growing divide within the military between traditional attitudes about women in combat roles and the practical reality of female personnel proving themselves in operational situations. The SEALs, focused primarily on mission success and competence, had less patience for bias that might undermine operational effectiveness. Meanwhile, Sarah spent the evening at home with her family, trying to process everything that had happened. The challenge coin sat on her kitchen table, catching the light as she turned it over in her hands. Her mother had finally stopped crying happy tears, and her brother kept asking questions about what it meant to receive recognition from Navy SEALs. "The thing that gets me," Jake said, "is that they didn't have to say anything. They could have just ignored what happened with the Admiral, but they chose to stick their necks out for you." Sarah nodded, understanding that the SEALs' intervention had been about more than just her personally. It was about principle, about recognizing competence regardless of demographics, and about maintaining the integrity of professional standards in the military. The phone rang several times that evening, with fellow officers calling to congratulate her on the SEAL recognition. Some of the calls were from people she barely knew, indicating how widely the story had spread. Each caller seemed to understand the broader significance of what had occurred. The most meaningful call came from Captain Elena Rodriguez, the highest-ranking female officer on the base. Captain Rodriguez had fought her own battles for recognition and advancement, and she understood exactly what Sarah had experienced that morning. "Sarah, what happened today was bigger than just you or Admiral Harrison," Captain Rodriguez said. "Those SEALs made a statement about merit and competence that needed to be made. They've given cover to a lot of people who might have been afraid to speak up about similar situations." By the following week, the story had reached well beyond Naval Base San Diego. Military publications picked up the account, focusing on the positive aspects of special operations personnel recognizing excellence regardless of gender. The story resonated particularly well with younger military personnel and veterans who had worked with competent female service members in various capacities. Admiral Harrison found himself in an increasingly uncomfortable position. Attempts to downplay or reframe the incident only drew more attention to his original treatment of Sarah. Senior Navy leadership began asking questions about his command climate and his approach to personnel management, particularly regarding female officers. The situation reached a turning point when Vice Admiral Catherine Wells, one of the Navy's most senior female officers and a member of the Joint Chiefs Staff, requested a meeting with Admiral Harrison. Vice Admiral Wells had built her career on competence and toughness, earning respect even from the most traditional elements of the Navy leadership. "Bob," she said during their private meeting, "we need to talk about what happened at that promotion ceremony. The optics are terrible, but more importantly, you might have undermined a highly competent officer based on personal bias." Admiral Harrison attempted to defend his position, arguing that he had treated Lieutenant Commander Martinez with appropriate professional courtesy. But Vice Admiral Wells had done her homework, reviewing Sarah's service record and speaking with personnel who had worked with her. "Her intelligence work has directly supported successful operations," Vice Admiral Wells continued. "The SEALs don't hand out challenge coins to people who don't deserve them. If they felt strongly enough to make a public statement about her value, maybe you should reconsider your assessment." The conversation was professional but pointed, making clear that Admiral Harrison's handling of the situation had been noticed at the highest levels of Navy leadership. The message was unmistakable. Personal biases that undermined competent personnel would not be tolerated, regardless of the seniority of the officer involved. Meanwhile, Sarah's career began to take on new momentum. The recognition from the SEAL team had opened doors that might have remained closed otherwise. She received requests to brief senior leadership on intelligence matters, was invited to participate in high-level strategic planning sessions, and found herself being considered for assignments that had previously seemed out of reach. Master Chief Thompson continued to monitor Sarah's career progress with interest. He had seen too many good people held back by biases that had nothing to do with their competence, and he was pleased to see that his intervention had helped create opportunities for someone who deserved them. 6 months later, Sarah received orders for a new assignment that would have seemed impossible before the promotion ceremony incident. She was selected to serve as the intelligence officer for a Joint Special Operations Task Force, a position that would put her at the center of critical national security operations. The assignment came with a personal note from the task force commander, a Navy captain who had heard about the SEAL team's endorsement and had specifically requested Sarah for his team. "I need the best intelligence officer I can get," the note read. and multiple sources tell me that's you." Admiral Harrison, meanwhile, found his own career trajectory affected by the incident. While he retained his position and rank, he was quietly counseled by senior leadership about the importance of recognizing and developing all competent personnel regardless of demographics. His reputation as a leader suffered, and several high-profile assignments he had been considered for went to other officers. The broader impact of the incident extended beyond the individual careers involved. The story became a case study in military leadership courses, highlighting how bias could undermine operational effectiveness and how peer recognition could counter unfair treatment. It demonstrated the importance of creating command climates where competence was valued above all other considerations. On the day Sarah departed for her new assignment, Master Chief Thompson was among the personnel who came to see her off. The brief conversation they had at the airport captured the essence of what had occurred months earlier. "Ma'am, I hope you know that what happened at that ceremony wasn't really about you personally," Marcus said. "It was about maintaining standards and recognizing excellence when we see it." Sarah smiled, understanding exactly what he meant. "Master Chief, what you and your team did that day changed everything for me. But more importantly, it sent a message that competence and character matter more than anything else." As Sarah's plane departed San Diego, she carried with her not just the SEAL Challenge coin, but the knowledge that she had allies throughout the military who valued her contributions. The incident that had begun with Admiral Harrison's dismissive treatment had ultimately demonstrated the power of peer recognition and the importance of standing up for principle. The challenge coin remained in her possession throughout her career, serving as a reminder that respect must be earned through competence and character. But that once earned, it could come from unexpected sources and have profound impacts. The SEALs who had chosen to recognize her excellence had not only validated her professional worth, but had also helped create a more merit-based environment for others who would follow. Years later, when Sarah reached senior leadership positions herself, she remembered the lesson of that promotion ceremony. She understood that leadership meant recognizing and developing competent personnel, regardless of personal biases, and that sometimes the most important thing a leader could do was publicly acknowledge excellence when they saw it, especially when others chose not to see it. The story became part of her leadership philosophy and influenced how she mentored other officers throughout her career. The respect she had earned from warriors who measured worth only by results remained one of her most treasured professional achievements, more valuable than any promotion or decoration she would subsequently receive.